Thank you. Welcome, everybody. I'm Hajo Eicken. I'm sitting here in Fairbanks. The sun is starting to rise above the horizon. It's a few degrees centigrade below freezing. Looks like a beautiful day. I hope it's nice out where you are all based at as well. I wanted to welcome you to this brief session that is meant to provide an opportunity for the different working groups that are part of the Arctic Observing Summit to briefly share any guidance for folks who are part of those working groups in terms of what they're hoping to achieve over the next few remaining hours, basically just another less than a day here to go in the Arctic Observing Summit. And it's also an opportunity for the summit organizers, and I see Peter Schlosser here as one of the co-lead organizers on the call, to share with you what we have in form of specific guidance for this concluding part of the summit. I appreciate Alan posting the broader guidance for the session here, but given that a lot of you have been part of various breakout sessions, we felt that it's appropriate not to spend much time on introductions and reviewing some of the key aspects of the meeting, but rather jump right in. And so with that, I would like to first give Peter Schlosser, as one of the summit co-organizers, the opportunity to give us a brief perspective from his point of view on what we're hoping to achieve over the remaining 20 or so hours here of the summit. Peter?
Thanks, Hajo. There are, of course, expectations that we had formulated before we went into the sessions with the working groups and before we went through the panel presentations, etc. And of course, one of the overall goals that we always have during these summits is to come up with a statement and a set of recommendations. And in this at this particular time, it should actually feed into the Arctic Science Ministerium. So that is something, actually that was the case the last time too, right? So that's something where we want to extract as much concrete information that we can from the discussions in the working groups, so that we can come up with some concise statements about where we think the state of the Arctic observing system is, but more importantly, where we feel there is a need for action, and put that into a context that's not just sort of asking for more resources, but for making a statement, a good case for why and where these resources are needed and should be provided. So just reflecting a little bit on the deliberations in working group 5, I have to say it is somewhat a different landscape, a different environment, different style experience actually to have these things virtually. So you often, you look into whatever 20 to 30 black rectangles, and sort of the dynamics is somewhat different. But I think we found a way to keep a conversation going, to really get to some of the pertinent points that were posted as part of working group 5. We are starting to extract some of the things. I remind people constantly that we are looking for recommendations, we are looking for something concrete, even if we start to wander here and there, bringing it back, trying to already work towards statements, towards content that we then can share with the others, and that could be woven into that last session that Hajo will share tomorrow, today, well, I don't know, at some point during the next 24 hours, that will in essence try to summarize what we discussed into a concise output that we hope will have some impact.
Great, thank you, Peter. I think that was very helpful. Why don't we proceed by just hearing from some of the other working group leads on their perspective, what they're aiming for in terms of refining or further developing concise products out of these remaining work group sessions. So I'd like to call on Rachel Daniel for Working Group 3. Rachel, if you could share a brief perspective from your working group on this topic. And Rachel, if you're muted, we can give you. Oh, there you go. Thanks.
So we've asked Lauren to share feedback for this, if that's okay.
Great. Yeah. No. Even better. Lauren Devine, if you'd like to.
Yes.
Share.
I am here and I'm unmuted now, I believe. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to provide the feedback by way of just kind of a summary and a little story that I hope can set the stage for our last final conversations within day 3. And so, you know, in light of the ongoing coronavirus pandemic, we know that it's presented a lot of challenges, not just in the summit conference planning and organizing, but is undoubtedly interrupting this year's field seasons for many, if not all of our researchers that conduct research in the Arctic. But we have really talked through how this is an opportunity. This is a timely, if forced, pause and a place that we can use to look at what's working and not working and how we can do things differently moving forward. For instance, our co-management federal agency partners have already contacted us proactively for the Pribilof Islands to look at how to locally execute a field season with their help virtually, but with our local people on the ground. And that really presents a situation for us that is powerful in that we have the opportunity to utilize funding for local management and monitoring and really gain capacity and show a proof of concept that we have that capacity to partner with researchers, regardless of whether they're in the field or not. And that at a local level, we have much to offer that hasn't been allowed to be offered before. And so we now have this chance to collectively evaluate kind of alternate processes that can advance collaboration through more community-driven, not community-based, but community-driven efforts to build capacity, both within Indigenous and remote Arctic communities, but also within the research community that might, free up researchers to focus on other areas rather than just the data collection of the field season. And so the pause provides the broader research and observing community time to spend learning about Indigenous cultures and relationship building. These were huge themes that have been drawn up in the last few days. There's an opportunity for everyone to kind of do their homework or catch up to reduce fragmentation of research and observing. And it's that start and stop again type of nature that I think we're all too familiar with research projects in some of these locations. And to learn about efforts that are already happening. Indigenous and remote communities are already attempting to address a lot of these things that we have seen rise up as common needs or issues across various levels, either through data collection efforts or through their work with Indigenous and local knowledge projects. And so with regards to the roads process, we're not interested in just linking observations across communities and across different scales. We're interested in fundamentally looking at the linkages between Indigenous communities and the science community. So unfortunately, our Indigenous efforts have been splintered because they're a product of the rigid funding and political systems that aren't compatible with Indigenous worldviews. And a lot of times this results in reinventing the wheel. And I know that Rhodes has been particularly focused on not that, on turning towards collaboration and, not duplicating effort, not reinventing the wheel. And so some of the key themes for our working group, the food security working group, that have come up thus far and that we hope will come into the conversations in day 3 and after the summit are things like the need for viewing food security through an Indigenous perspective. Our synthesis and our key themes that are posted on the summit website highlight this, and our synthesis goes into detail on that. On appropriately acknowledging the contribution of Indigenous peoples and organizations, on capacity building for Indigenous peoples, communities, and for researchers so that we can all work together more effectively. Appropriately acknowledging and valuing Indigenous knowledges and Indigenous languages as they are used to understand observations, as well as the need for a common language within the roads process. And lastly, we really wanted to highlight that human wellness and human health is linked to each and every aspect of everything that we're discussing within the roads framework. And our Indigenous people in our conversations, every participant has really highlighted and reflected on how human health and wellness needs to be reflected in the development and implementation of the observation system. And that really needs to be brought forward within the conversations. And I invite any other working group 3 input here.
Thanks, Lauren. Any others from working group 3 who want to chime in? I see some comments in the chat box, and I appreciate this as well. I actually, if I can respond directly, Lauren, one of the challenges we have, and that hopefully is something we can explore tomorrow with input from the different working groups, is that the Arctic Science Ministerial is currently scheduled for November, or is scheduled for November, right? It'll take place in Japan. Because it involves science ministers, there's a lot of preparations. If you want to learn more about those who aren't familiar, the keynote presentation from Yuji Kodama has a lot of really useful input. But there's a couple of things that are important to do now, as you highlighted in terms of urgency. And so tomorrow we have the opportunity to speak directly with Minister Lilja Alfredsdottir from Iceland, who's the Icelandic Minister for Science and Education, who's one of the co-leads of the Arctic Science Ministerial, and see whether we can explore and identify a way in which the concerns and opportunities that you've just identified can be acted on, starting ideally as soon as possible, right? So that we don't end up with a situation where it's only late in the year when a lot of the both potential momentum has been lost, but also substantial potentially negative impacts have hit. And so that's a key thing we need to figure out is, are there things that we can do as the different countries prepare for the summit to inject these points into the different countries' preparations, which we will discuss in a bit more detail here amongst the organizing committee, how to do that. But if your working group has ideas, that would be great to both have them contributed in your written summary that will be part of the conference statement, but also tomorrow to be ready to bring this up in the conversation that we hope to have with Minister Alfredsdottir. So with that, I don't know, any other comments on working group 3?
Yep. I'll just add, this is Lauren again. We have every one of our recommended key themes comes as well with recommended actions that we hope are concrete and clear, concise actions that can be taken after the summit. And so I think we will be prepared tomorrow just for exactly what you asked for. So we have been thinking of that.
Great. I appreciate it. Thank you. So let's go to working group 2, and I realize we're a bit out of order here, but I saw that we have Mary Beth Murray on here. So working group 2, observing for adaptation mitigation. Mary Beth.
Hi. Hajo, thank you. Yeah, our working group has worked through a couple of different examples, and we've kind of moved into a writing stage now, so that we can bring some written material forward to everybody. We are a pretty diverse group, but I'm just going to grab my notes here. I wasn't quite expecting to be called on. But we have a couple of different examples of EAVs that we've been working on that we think speak directly to issues around adaptation and mitigation, food security, obviously, but also we have considered land change or land use cover, disaster risk reduction, human health. We had quite a lot of discussion around pollution and its relationship to human health and wildlife health. So we were, I think, quite successful also at determining sort of broad criteria for what would constitute impactful EAVs given the different use cases that we tried to work through. So we look forward to sharing our written material with the larger group tomorrow, I guess.
Great, thanks, Maribeth. And just as a reminder for all of us, because of the way the summit has evolved as an online meeting, there will be opportunity. And you know, the detailed number of days that opportunity will exist is something that we'll discuss here in half an hour or so amongst the org. For all the summit participants to comment on and suggest revisions for the joint statement for probably on the order of a week or so after conclusion of the summit. So we want to be sure that the different working groups have an opportunity to look at what some of the other working groups have put forward and then kind of hone their own or suggest changes to other working group suggestions to strengthen the cross linkages between these different efforts. Working group 1, Alice, do you want to just share a quick perspective?
Sure. So working group 1 has been kind of diving into the details of the roads process and questions around how we define essential Arctic variables, what sorts of recommendations we can make for a structured model, and then linking all of those to societal benefit areas and applications. So the kind of main themes that have come out are that existing observing system models, things like GOOSE or atmospheric programs through WMO, are doing really quite well at these discipline-specific problems, and that we don't need to reinvent those tools. Instead, the real value in Arctic and an integrated Arctic observing system and the outcome of roads would be to focus on the cross-sector information and requirements sharing. So an essential Arctic variable is something that we might instead call, say, a shared Arctic variable, something that is both important, or the criteria being that it's important to importantly multiple stakeholders and sector groups. So the key part here is that it's something that's broadly impactful, and no matter how important it is to one particular group, we're looking for places where there are shared needs. And that a key feature of this structured model and the information product that's developed as part of it is a mechanism for different parts of the observing community in different sectors to share the needs and requirements that they have for these observations, so that we can leverage leverage observational efforts in one community to provide information for the others. So a proposal is that we have kind of grouped types of observations or clusters in which we can have kind of defined standards that are both achievable by different groups and that provide information across these sectors, and again, can address questions and leverage limited resources. Finally, we recognize that moving forward with the roads process is going to require a number of expert panels. These should be broadly inclusive and include or be built around an iterative process in order to get multiple opportunities for community input and response.
Great, thanks, Alice. That was very helpful. Working group 4, data I know Peter Pulsifer is actually part of the PhD defense as we speak. I was wondering, do we have other members here? I see Shannon is on. I don't know whether you could speak briefly for Working Group 4, just in terms of what you hope to achieve with the final session, Shannon.
Yes, I can speak briefly, Hajo. So we have been going through a variety of very well-attended and intense discussions in the data sessions, which has been great. Lots of animated talks. Like theme 3, we have been looking at the virtual meetings as a way to connect our community, improve continuity in our technical discussions, and further some of our goals through the use of things like rolling global hackathons. We have been going through a variety of topics. We've ranged from looking at the Say on Roads project. We've talked about metadata interoperability, federated search, looking at ways to connect our different data systems to better serve researchers and communities. Essentially, we have ended up dividing into 2 key areas, one being community, how we can better connect within the data community, as well as connect to other communities, indigenous, global researchers, and how we can best work with these different groups. We've also looked at the second theme has been really technical, looking towards interoperable catalogs, developing vocabulary so our systems can speak to each other, looking at what new technologies might be available to work with. And as we have finished up our we've had 4 sessions to work on so far. We are now moving into writing sessions, and we have a session coming up in about 2 to 3 hours today, which is going to be dedicated to writing, as well as one first thing tomorrow. And we hope to have a pretty concrete product to produce for creating the statement. And I think if anybody else here that was in the data group wants to add, I'm happy to hand that over, or if anybody has any questions.
Thanks, Shannon. Anybody want to add from Group 4 data? If not, that was good to hear. So it looks like things are moving forward well. I want to acknowledge, I got a comment earlier today from a researcher. Actually, I hope she doesn't mind that I call her out here, Kat Smith, who has been part of the Working Group 3 meetings. She could even comment on this herself, but I'll paraphrase briefly. That she felt it was good to have these cross-cutting sessions here at the meeting, and maybe we should have been spending more time in cross-cutting meetings as well. And I think that's an important recognition that if you feel having more communication across working groups is something that you valued, that we may not have done enough of during the summit, I would encourage you to use opportunities down the line after the summit to connect on these issues as well. And in particular, as you prepare for your final products here over the next day or so, please think about what is needed to be able to continue and deepen the dialogue across the different working groups beyond the summit. That, in my mind, reflecting on some of the comments people have voiced here, is going to be an important aspect of the work going forward. So please keep that in mind as well. With that, I would just open it up for broader questions from the people who are on the floor here as part of the meeting. If you have any other questions or specific concerns, let me know or let us know. Raise your hand or type it in the chat box. But if there's nothing specific, I'll give folks a bit more time. Oh, I see a hand up here from Eva. Go ahead, Eva.
Thank you, Hajo. Yeah, actually, I just got a question from somebody who was wondering about the upcoming working group meetings, and that it sounds like at least 2 working groups have decided to make that kind of closed sessions to write. Are they still allowing participation from others, or did they just want to leave it at the discussions that they had in the past and just write and kind of close it for others to attend? That would be helpful to know.
That's a good question that I can't answer. I don't actually know which working groups you're referring to. So those working group leads that have decided to have closed writing sessions, can you chime in on this, please?
Yeah, so this is Maribeth. So we are having a writing session, but I am going to have the channel open and be there if people want to come in and I was just having an offline chat with Rachel about this. If people want to come in, and I'll be there, I can bring everyone up to speed in more detail about what our working group has been doing, and happy to take input from others. And I'll be on there for the last hour of that session, which would be, I don't know what time that is, but 5 to 6 where I am Mountain Time, 4 o'clock Alaska.
Great. That was one of them. I don't know which one was the other one that you might have been referring to, Eva.
That's fine. That's actually the one that I just heard about the interest, but that was just good to know that there is still the opportunity.
Yeah, and I see Lauren commented on this as well, that working group 3 members were going to attend other groups. I think that's great, right? Because again, arguably the splitting into working groups is necessary because of some of the focused work, but now in particular, as people have gotten a better sense of, okay, what are the things that they feel are important to move forward, joining other groups and providing additional guidance on how to strengthen those particular, the words on the page or the broader ideas or identifying next steps is going to be quite helpful. So I think that's good to see this cross collaboration. Any other questions? If not, we're basically at the end of our half hour. Appreciate everybody's input. Again, it's good, with these meetings, there's always kind of a slump, and if it's an in-person meeting, usually, you can deal with the meeting slump because you're meeting somebody else over coffee, or you're having a chat over dinner or breakfast or whatever, and either commiserate or say, no, things are going to get better. But of course, with these dispersed meetings, I don't know how all of you have been able to deal with the inevitable meeting slumps. Those are there, but it's been just really encouraging to see people pull together despite all these challenges. And I know some of you have substantially bigger challenges than we might even think. So it's great to see people collaborate. It'd be good to keep that momentum going, not just across the next 24 hours, but then also beyond the summit. So make good use of your time and enjoy the rest of the day, and we'll talk to you tomorrow. Bye.